This is Weights and Wealth, your one-stop shop for entertaining education on building a stronger body and bank account.
We are not doctors or financial advisors and must warn you this is not medical or investing advice. It is for your entertainment.
Am I doing the intro? Okay, welcome back to Weights and Wealth. We're back here in the basement as usual. Gonna do a few quick holiday episodes. They're not holiday focused, but they'll be released here in the back half of December. So today we've got a Would You Rather 5Fs edition. And then next week will be a bingo recap from our 2024 bingo. You can see who won and how good or bad our predictions were.
Results are a little sketchy at this point,
yeah.
So it's gonna be an interesting discussion.
Yeah, we're about halfway through December right now as we're gonna record these two. And then first episode back in the new year will be our 2025 bingo boards. So if you're interested in our predictions for 2025, definitely make sure to check into that one. If you really liked the book club episode, we've already gotten some good feedback on The Myth of Capitalism. So if you liked that episode, definitely let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, and if you have any books that you want us to do in the future for book club. Yeah. Our shout out for this episode goes to Ryan from Boston, Massachusetts. I actually found out through somebody else that Ryan listens to pretty much every episode and talks to the person that told me that about the episodes. So Ryan, thank you for listening. We really appreciate it. And the weights wisdom for this week is if you're going to do cardio and lifting in the same session, put your cardio at the end. If your goal is to gain muscle, gain strength, increase your metabolism, make the first part of your workout that you get the most out of your lifting. And then at the end, you can throw in a little bit of cardio. Yeah. That's going to be the best way for your gains because whatever you do first, you're going to use the most energy for typically. And so you want that to be your lifts, your heavy lifts, your compound lifts, or in some cases, like we've talked about, if you have a lagging body part, you could do that first.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know if it's entirely true, but I have read before that generally having your cardio at the end of a workout will cause you to you're more likely to use fat as a fuel due to you burning off the glucose and carbohydrates with the lifting in the front. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, whenever people talk about that kind of stuff, I don't really pay too much mind to it. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be more about like your total calories and everything. So, yeah, I don't really care too much about whether you're burning more sugar or fat. Because it's going to be the fat that's already in your bloodstream. It's going to be quicker energy most of the time.
That's very fair. So for our intro article this week, we have YouTube restricting teenager access to fitness videos, and this is in the UK. They're going to be.
Oh, it's just UK. It's not.
Yeah, I don't think it's the only coverage I've seen is in the UK.
Okay,
so it's the BBC, the Guardian,
yep,
stuff like that. It's and then it's like Youth and Families Advisory Committee. It's all these like UK governmental entities.
Okay.
And British professors. So it's I haven't seen any like coverage of it specifically in the US. But basically they're going to be no longer allowing you to like the algorithm to feed you similar content, particularly ones that compare physical features and idealize some body types over others. Videos idealizing specific fitness levels or body weights, and videos displaying social aggression in the form of non-contact fights and intimidation. So basically they said that they're taking these actions as teens are more likely than adults to form negative beliefs about themselves when seeing repeated messages about ideal standards and content they consume online.
Yeah, so this was interesting to me because the way the algorithm works is if I watch Ashton Janty highlights as I'm preparing for my Dynasty rookie draft next year, it's going to keep giving me other Boise State highlights or other rookie highlights. It's going to pull from that same kind of content and suggest it next. But if YouTube is going to stop recommending other fitness content after you watch a fitness video, and then the next video up in the queue for you is just some other random topic.
Lululemon box review.
Or something else. Well, that's going to just put a damper on the amount of fitness content consumed. And their main point it said in the article is they want to stop people from going down fitness rabbit holes. I think this is not good.
Generally, yes.
For me personally, as I was getting into lifting, I didn't really use YouTube too much. I relied more on like a couple people on Instagram and bodybuilding.com. And at the time, Muscle for Life, which is now just on Legion, Mike Matthews, shout out, potential future guest. He used to live right around the corner in Tyson's Corner, but
really?
Now he's in Florida.
Shucks.
So, but yeah, so I relied more on those sources, but like allowing people to consume that content if they're interested in it, I don't think you should restrict that. Especially since it's mostly positive. I do think that the biggest reason they're doing this is because of teenage girls that develop negative body image issues.
Definitely.
But for guys, I think it's kind of the opposite because our brains work a little bit differently. For me, when I look at...
How could you say that?
For me, when I look at like CBum on social media or whatever, you know, it's more like inspiring to me than me comparing myself to CBum and being like, oh, damn, I'm never going to be that shredded or that big. So
you mean to tell me you
I
don't
must
get
be a terrible person.
anxiety from that?
No.
Must just be me. No, I agree with what you're saying. But I think this only applies to like minors. So
yeah, it's a 13 to 17-year-olds.
Yeah, so it's a very small group. But regardless, you know, like restricting, you know, non-harmful content online. You know, it's one thing with like pornography or stuff like that. That makes sense. But like a guy benching 315 for reps is not gonna necessarily cause disorders.
It might radicalize you
unless you already have like deep-seated issues. Like that's not gonna cause a problem. You know what I mean? Like if you already have a problem, maybe it'll make it worse and make it like expand into another realm. But you're already kind of the people that are vulnerable in this are already kind of vulnerable. So it's like you're not going to be making much progress and help.
Yeah, and the comparison that I always think of for like body image issues among teens and the difference between men and women is you have the like 90s, early 2000s, what do they call it? Like heroin chic.
Yeah,
like kind of like starved,
stuff like that.
Like models on magazines, and that was like for women. They say it was like an unfair body idealization or standard. But then
but now you got Kim Kardashian, which is like the opposite.
Yeah, but then for guys, it's like our comparison was action figures and superheroes and like bodybuilders. And it's like, okay, well that's also a completely unrealistic body standard because you'd have to take massive amounts of steroids and put a lot of hard work in over many years to get to that level. So it's just as unrealistic, but it's only ever really talked about on the women's side, how it's like an unrealistic body standard. But I think the main thing there is how men and women think differently.
That's fair enough. So going into our first Would You Rather, and this is kind of more in Ted's lane, it's regarding to health. So if you had to pick one and you had to consume it every day, or, you know, like as a significant portion of your diet, would you rather it be seed oils, high fructose corn syrup, or dyes?
All right. So I'll do like a 15-second on each, how they might affect you. So seed oils are going to be inflammatory. Dyes are going to affect your digestion. There's cool videos you can look up where they've scoped people's digestive systems when they consume like a Gatorade, and they have red dye 40 in their stomach and their digestive system, and it makes your gut lining in your large intestine, your small intestine, it basically affects the uptake of everything that you're eating. So like when they see food normally go through the small intestine, they'll see the little philia kind of move and everything, and the nutrients get absorbed. And then when the dye is in there, everything just looks kind of dead. And things aren't getting, your nutrients and stuff that you're eating aren't getting
So
as
you're not
absorbed as
absorbing
much.
stuff as
Yeah,
as
so
properly as
that's
you
one of the
can.
main things with the dyes. And then the high fructose corn syrup, that can also inflame your digestive system if it's sprayed with glyphosate and everything, which 90+% of corn is GMO corn that's sprayed with Roundup and glyphosate. But the one that I would choose, also the other thing with high fructose corn syrup is it makes you want to keep eating more. So
It's not satiating at all.
Yeah.
Like whereas a glucose will kind of cause your body's glucose receptors to ping and be like, oh wow, that was very sweet. I'm, I got my fill. Fructose, since it's artificial, does not have the same like your body doesn't have the same reaction to fructose drinks, so therefore you end up consuming more of this like, processed sugar.
And like fructose kind of does that naturally, but you're not going to notice that by just eating fruit. But the high fructose corn syrup is more concentrated, and you're getting a much larger amount if you drink like a soda. So because of that, it makes you eat more, and that's part of the deal with people overeating processed foods. So if I had to eat one of these every day, the one that I would go with would be an organic high fructose corn syrup.
What about an organic seed oil?
I would still stay away from that.
Like wouldn't olive oil technically be a seed oil?
No, well, I mean, you could say technically, but I would argue no, because the way that they're pressing it to get the oil out is different.
Yeah.
With these highly processed seed oils, the amount of like chemical, I mean, it's basically
they're bleached.
Yeah, they're bleached. They're deodorized. They're adding all these different chemicals in the process of getting that oil from seed to industrial lubricant slash.
Yes, if you ever
food
want to
additive.
be like, if you're already aware of high fructose corn syrup and like the dyes and stuff like that, but aren't really aware of seed oils, just look up how they make canola oil.
It's
and
pretty crazy.
You'll reconsider like eating that in copious amounts. And the sad thing is it's widely used in the restaurant industry, so you're gonna kind of it's almost unavoidable at this point, but it's certainly best to minimize it because it's it causes inflammation, and chronic inflammation of course leads to arthritis, heart disease, metabolic syndrome, stroke, and even diabetes. So generally want to avoid that. The next one we have is a classic meme. If you're terminally online, I'm sure you've seen this. It basically says, it's just kind of, it's a meme, but I just took the text out. It says, my grandpa with lead poisoning, my dad with asbestos, and me with microplastics. So
Every generation gets poisoned.
We're all getting, like damaged in some way by, whether it's by society or by the infrastructure, that we live in, like our grandparents with lead poisoning because of lead water pipes.
And lead paint.
Yeah. And then like our parents' generation, so like boomers with, asbestos that being used in construction and stuff like that. And, residential areas.
Still around in a lot of our army buildings.
And then us with the microplastics, where we're getting like microplastics in our brains and like all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, there's a study came out where they looked at a bunch of different testicles, and every single testicle had microplastics in it.
That's pretty heinous. There's pee and microplastics in your testicles. So basically, what
Classic pee is stored in the balls meme.
Exactly. So basically, lead is going to cause everything, like it's seriously neurotoxic, high blood pressure, cardiovascular damage, kidney damage, reduced fetal growth, all sorts of stuff like that.
Are you saying heavy metals aren't good for your organs?
I would argue that, yes. So it was primarily used up until like the 1930s when copper kind of took, the majority of the market share in the piping industry due to it being more reliable. But it wasn't actually banned until 1986. And
it was in gas too. So when people were driving, there was like lead particulates that were coming out of everyone's cars.
Yeah. So essentially, like it kind of took almost 2 decades of like concerted effort to get it, taken out of the system, and we're still seeing like the damage from it today. As far as asbestos, lung cancer, asbestosis, which is a non-cancer disease of the lung. Of course, mesothelioma, the classic
commercial.
Yep. It was actually regulated in the first time in 1970 by being classified as hazardous. It's essentially it's a mineral that is used to make items fire and heat resistance to improve durability. There is still no general ban in the U.S. It's just highly regulated, and it's even found in some cosmetic products. So if you're a woman or you are dating one or married, or you have daughters, you probably want to look at their makeup product and make sure they don't have asbestos in their makeup, because they're literally scrubbing that on the largest organ of their body and absorbing it in high amounts. So there is a federal ban that was proposed in 2022, but still no action has been taken. And finally, microplastics, endocrine disruption, insulin resistance, chronic inflammation, induced cell death, metabolic homeostasis, meaning you don't have much ability to change what's going on. And there was absolutely zero regulation with this. And I mean, if I had to have one, I think I'd go with the microplastics, just because we don't know enough yet about how damaging it is. Whereas the other ones are pretty bad. Microplastics, endocrine disruption is a huge thing. If you are aware at all of the hormonal crisis that is going on in the world, with testosterone levels plummeting and fertility plummeting, they're a big culprit of that. But they're more avoidable than lead in your water pipes and asbestos in your house. It's those are pretty hard to get away from. Whereas microplastics, it's okay, I'm not gonna have a plastic water bottle.
Yeah. If you still drink out of plastic water bottles, please read one of our former book club books, Countdown by Dr. Shauna Swan. Yeah. It goes in depth into microplastics and the fertility crisis, and a little bit of the hormone crisis as well.
Yeah. If you had to pick one, Ted, what would you go with?
Oh gosh. I guess microplastics. The other ones are just so bad. Maybe asbestos. I don't know.
Love me some microplastics. All right. So now we're going to dive into the more specifically 5Fs ones. So we'll go through these pretty smoothly. We won't bore you totally. But as far as faith, Ted, would you rather be surrounded by people hostile to faith in general, kind of like the Soviet Union or communist China, or hostile particularly to your faith, like you're a Christian living under ISIS?
This is my first time seeing this one, so why don't you go first?
I think that I would rather be in the Soviet Union, because then everybody's a gray man, everybody has secrets. Whereas if you're a Christian under ISIS or a Jewish person under ISIS, you're a smaller minority, and in my head, just my thought process, more vulnerable, right? There's less of you, and the people in power have a particular vendetta against you. Whereas if you're in the Soviet Union, you could be Buddhist, Mormon, Christian, Catholic, Jewish, and they just don't like any of you. And so it's not singling you out and particularly looking for signs that you may be this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of a wider net, but with a wider net, there's more holes.
Yeah, I'd probably go hostile to faith in general as well, because there's more holes. It's easier to slip through. And I feel like there's more opportunity for you to evangelize and bring people to Jesus. If everyone is of a different religion, hostile to your religion, it's going to be really hard for you to do any kind of evangelizing with other people, because they're going to be so set in their ways. But if they're just non-religious, or if they would like to be religious but are just scared to be because the government is hostile to faith in general, I feel like there's more opportunity for you to lead more people.
I would agree with that. I think that's a fair point. So would you rather have a collective or individualized faith life? So kind of like that, pray in private, be a very good Christian in your individual acts and duties, or would you rather be a part of like a large and very active parish?
Definitely a collective, because I think the Bible tells us to have like a very vertical faith, where we have a very strong faith with Jesus. But I think it also tells us to have a horizontal faith where we have that church community. So I think collective gives you the opportunity for both.
I would agree with that. What are your thoughts on like I don't really know what to call them, but the kinds of Christians who say like God is not in the church, and like, like they're like, oh, I just read the Bible. I don't go to church. Or like I'm not involved.
Yeah. I think that's a shame because there is so much value in being part of a church. So yeah, I would definitely say like just reading the Bible, you're probably just not getting everything that you could get if you also belonged to a church and went consistently.
Yeah. I mean,
and it helps to have other people that can keep you in check, have a brother that can call you out when you're doing something wrong. So
definitely. I mean, like human beings are social animals, and I don't think really any aspect of our life is meant to be like totally individual. Like even like the more like inappropriate aspects of your life, like there's a reason why masturbation is seen as a negative, but copulation with your wife is good, right? Because it's supposed to be a social thing. There's supposed to be another person involved. Everything, even the things that you think are the most private aspects of your life, are meant to be shared. It's just a matter of how many people are supposed to be shared with. You know what I mean? So old church style, so like old rite, very traditional, beautiful, or like I'm not going to betray my own bias,
a little bit of bias,
but
here.
like very like medieval architecture, stained glass. You're sitting in a pew, or more of the new church, like the startup vibe.
Yeah. So
where it's like, hey, like we're just bringing Jesus, and that's what we got.
This is where Sean and I attend different styles of churches, I would say. But you might be surprised by my answer. So I've attended many different churches that are that startup church plant style. It's basically a section of a strip mall, something like that. I've attended some of those, and I've attended kind of everything on that spectrum, from that church plant in a strip mall up to like a Catholic service in a like a basilica. So kind of like that full spectrum. I think there's a lot of value in having churches with beautiful architecture. I prefer my church that I go to have pews instead of chairs. I think the goal of church planted startup churches should be to
eventually
get a church that doesn't really have any attendance and is fading away. Get into that church.
Yeah, go by that United Church of Christ that has 3 old ladies that go there.
Yeah, and a lot of these old mainline Protestant churches that have either become like progressive Christianity churches. What is it? United Methodist? Is that the
stuff
one?
like United Church of Christ, United Methodist, a lot of Lutheran sects.
Yeah, so some of those churches, or just the churches that have a really old congregation that are fading away, I feel like the church plants should go and try to acquire those churches and bring their congregation there. And then they can also add those other people that used to attend in. Because I do think there's a lot of value in like your classic church steeple. That's the highest building in town that points to God and is a symbol for everyone to look at, and having beautiful architecture and being in a place during service where you're surrounded by these beautiful murals.
You're
and
reminded of why you're there. You know, that's my thing is like you should feel like God could be there. And whereas like a more like contemporary Christian worship is, I think it's fine. It's good. Like, I think you are doing a nice thing, but I don't think it's like, it doesn't feel as reverential as like you going to service, you going to mass should be. You know, it's like, it's one thing to be like shouting and jumping for joy and like really happy and like, you know, just lots of human emotion going on, which is good. And it has its time and it has its place. But like when you're going there to like meditate on the scriptures and like learn, you know, it's more academic almost, where like, because you're there to strengthen your faith and not just get a dopamine hit.
Yeah. And I agree like partially. But I do think that it's not required. You don't have to be in like a very nice
Well, obviously
church.
it's not required. But,
I don't
but
think
that's the purpose of that,
Yeah.
is to create that atmosphere of like serious, like you're in a serious place that you need to take this seriously, and it's not going to turn into a Buc-ee's tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know.
But like I also think it just completely depends on the church and the congregation, because whether it's our old church in South Carolina, which is like does not look like a church at all. It was basically an abandoned building that they bought and took over. Or the Baptist church I go to now, which looks like a traditional like chapel kind of church and has pews and everything, but isn't ornate in any sense. But I think it's like a beautiful church. Like as long as the preaching is really good, like I got way more out of those churches from the preaching and going in depth into the Bible than like the Catholic masses I went to growing up. So I think it really just depends on the specific parish that you're going to, with like how much they actually, like Sean was saying, like go academically into scripture and stuff like that.
I mean,
Even across denominations, there's a whole spectrum.
That's the hardest part about like any type of church, is like you go to any different church and it is literally determined by whoever the head honcho is. You know, like if you're Lutheran, if you're Protestant, or if you're Lutheran, Calvinist, evangelical, Christian, non-denominational, Catholic, Orthodox, a lot of what I would say in some ways that's a fundamental difference between like the Orthodox and Catholic, and then like Protestant side is like the Catholic and Orthodox side, you're going there because of the sacrament, right? So while if I go to a mass with a priest that I'm not thrilled with, I have still received communion. I have still fulfilled my duty as a Catholic, and you know, I have received that grace from communion. Whereas in a Protestant church, generally they don't believe in like actual transubstantiation.
Yeah.
So it's like it's more about the human technically, right? Because it's not a metaphysical function that's going on, like you going to receive your spiritual nutrition. It's like
It's consubstantiation is symbolic.
So it is definitely a little more dependent on that for like the spiritual virtues that you get from it. Whereas, it's complex.
To wrap it up, I would say like a nice, beautiful church, a church with pews, to me, that's a bonus.
Yes.
When I'm looking at a church.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Definitely. So with fitness, our second F, would you rather only program bilateral or compound? So like example, bench press versus dumbbell bench press.
Yeah. So if you're only bilateral, you can't have any kind of unilateral movements in there. No Bulgarian split squats or lunges. I guess that would also take out some rotational exercises that I do. Some lateral exercises. Compound, if you can only do squat, bench, deadlift, row, compound lifts, I feel like you have a much higher chance of injuries and aches and pains with only doing compounds than with only doing bilaterals. Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that only do kettlebell movements, a lot of unilateral stuff, and they're still getting great workouts. They're making a lot of progress, getting stronger, building muscle. So I'd probably go only. Oh, that's only bilateral. Is that supposed to be only unilateral?
Yeah, unilateral. Sorry.
Yeah. So I would do only unilateral rather than only compound. But I would really miss benching and squatting.
I would agree. I mean, you're the overall benefit from, you know, a unilateral movement is great. You might not get as pound for pound strong.
Yeah, definitely.
But you will probably end up healthier, and in some schools of thought, put on more muscle.
Yeah, I mean, for the listeners, if you're listening to this conversation, it's obviously not optimal to be trapped into one.
Don't only do one.
Yeah, and even though you can get stronger if you only do compound compared to only unilateral, a lot of listeners out there would probably get stronger on their compound lifts if they did a phase of just unilateral exercises.
Yep, definitely.
Or added them in to their current program.
All right, so next one. Would you rather eat only vegetables or only fruit? So we're going into the secondary food groups, as I like to call them. You know, definitely not necessary for life, as you can probably get 95% of the nutritional value that you need from like meat and dairy.
And eggs.
And I said dairy.
You think eggs are dairy?
Yeah, I consider eggs dairy.
Okay.
Do you consider eggs dairy?
No.
Really? No. Maybe I'm weird. That's just me. But
so would you rather eat vegetables or fruit if you could only have one? Not only vegetables or only fruit.
You know,
we're still including meat and everything else.
Yeah, no,
I would take the fruit.
Let's say it's like the year and you cannot eat a single vegetable that year.
Yeah, I would take fruit for sure.
Yeah.
I do definitely enjoy vegetables. There is some nutritional value.
Vegetable.
I'm a vegetable. Yeah, I would take the fruit because of the carbs and being able to have the fruit around workouts. I don't want to really eat vegetables around my workouts. I'd rather have the fruit and get more carbs. So I would do fruit.
Makes sense. So in finance, all right. Would you rather own a business or be a highly paid partner, career-wise?
Can we switch this? Because I think can we switch this to own a business or be a 9-to-5 salary worker?
Well, see, that's the thing is like when I'm posing this question, we're saying a successful business and a successful 9-to-5 career.
See, but I don't like that question because most businesses fail.
Fair enough. So 9-to-5 versus own a business.
Yeah, so owning a business is going to be way harder. A lot of people don't understand the amount of work that you have to put in growing a startup and how hard it is and how risky it is. So everybody wants to be an entrepreneur right now. It's like one of the hot things. But a lot of people are better off being a 9-to-5 worker. And you can still accumulate wealth. Like we talked about before, one of the book club books, Cash Flow Quadrants, Robert Kiyosaki. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. But that book is a great book for anyone that is looking at what kind of investor they should be. And it goes through types of investors that you can be even if you are a 9-to-5. You don't have to own a business or a piece of a business to still accumulate assets and build wealth.
100%. Yeah, I mean, he basically talks into how, like, you know, owning a business versus being self-employed. Some people confuse those because you can be self-employed, like you own your own business, but does the business own you or do you own the business?
Yep.
And the difference is, can you walk away for 3 months and then come back and everything's still running smoothly? So
I would rather own a business, and that's just because of my like personality and work style. I'm a workhorse. I don't mind working crazy hours. I do like, now that I'm married, I prefer not to because I prefer to spend time with my wife than be trapped at work. But like before I was married, I'd get home from work and I'd do other work. So I would rather own a business.
I think owning a business is good because the amount of work you put in directly correlates to how you're compensated. And I think that's what a lot of people struggle with is that it takes a very long time in the corporate world for you to see like a return on your time investment, right? You know, like you might only get promoted that year, right? And you worked your butt off. You were doing 60-hour work weeks all week long and you only got, you know, a title bump. You didn't even get like a financial compensation in the form of a raise, right?
That's one of the most frustrating aspects of the Army, where it's timeline focused mostly as far as when you get promoted, and that's your pay increase is just attached to your rank. So you can be a really good officer or NCO or like lower enlisted guy, and there's terrible soldiers of the same rank, and you guys get paid the same, even if you're putting in way more effort, contributing way more. So that that can be tough.
I understand what you're saying. Finally, in the financial section, just as a joke, if you had to bet versus gamble as a way to support your family,
so
which would you rather?
Betting is here. Betting on non-Bitcoin cryptocurrencies.
No. I'm just saying. I'm just saying
sports.
betting like sports betting versus going to the casino.
Oh, sports betting
and like playing poker and stuff like that.
I mean, yeah, for sports betting, I have a pretty good system down, and I profit every year. It might not be a lot. It's more just like a fun thing, and my bets are almost entirely $1 to $5 bets. So I'm not making a ton of money, but I'm also never losing money. And I'm able to pull out a couple times during the football season, $100 usually out of starting with 25. So I have a pretty good system down, and I'd rather do sports betting than gambling at a casino.
I think that makes sense. And I mean, gambling, like I'm including poker in this, which is skill based and you can get better at it. But I think gambling or betting in general is probably a more sustainable path because you can kind of predict things, like you can look at fantasy football and be like, okay, this guy's probably going to catch, like statistically speaking, he's probably going to catch at least three. He's gonna have 3 receptions this game, right? And this guy is probably gonna have at least 50 rushing yards.
Yeah.
So like statistically speaking, you're more likely to be able to.
Yeah, and if you're a guy that loves sports and statistics with sports get seared into your brain, even if other stuff is hard to remember, like you can be good at that. 2 for 2 playoffs in my fantasy leagues.
Nice. So freedom.
Supplemental income. Fantasy football.
Yes. Would you rather have a written or living constitution? Like something that is very easy to amend and kind of, just goes with society? Or would you rather have something that is very obstinate and kind of, just it is written in blood and ink and does not change unless literally everybody comes together and is like, we need to make a decision here?
Yeah, I would prefer written and difficult to amend. This is one of the key points of American representative democracy, Republican, a republic, really. The problem with a direct democracy is that it turns into mob rule really quick. If everyone can just vote on something and there's no representatives and it's really easy to change stuff, you just need a simple majority. Very quickly, it just becomes mob rule, and whatever the mob wants, the mob gets. And I think we've seen over history how mob rule typically leads to chaos and death.
Yep. That's kind of a gimme question. I was trying to think of one that would be better in the freedom, quote unquote, F. But it's kind of difficult to come up with a question. So I'm sorry if that was kind of a floater. As far as family, would you rather have a large or small family? And we're going to quantify that as small is anything 4 and below.
3 and below.
3 and below. Large is anything 5 and above.
Okay. So I come from 4.
Because I think 4 is like...
Oh, wait, are you talking kids or total population of the family?
Kids.
Okay.
Because I think
4 is a pretty
like
big family nowadays.
I feel like that's... I mean, nowadays, but like I'm saying like in total, it's not... Like you can buy pretty much any consumer car and fit those people.
That's true.
Any SUV, you'll be able to fit your whole family in there.
Okay, yeah. I'm
5 people, it's like you need to get that like Suburban. You need to get something big.
I'm definitely big family here. 5 or more kids. That's what Alex and I would like. And I think there's just so many pros of having a big family. I think the only real con of having a big family is that it's more expensive. I think everything else is better with having a big family. Yeah, I always feel bad when people have like really small families because it's like you must have been so bored growing up. What'd you do to entertain yourself? It's so much fun having
Watch a
bunch
lot of
of other
TV, I
kids
guess.
your age that you're with every day.
Definitely. All right. Well, I think that's it for this episode.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next week.
All right. See you guys.
Thanks for joining us today at Weights and Wealth. And don't forget to apply today's lessons to live healthy and wealthy.
If this conversation will contribute to your fitness and financial gains, please share it with a friend or family member and give a 5-star review so more people can lift bigger weights and get bigger bank accounts.